Dong, D-O-N-G, Ju, J-U-E, not here. Ms. Hawks, not here. Julie Ho, not here. Patricia McAllister,
Mr. Chairman, I like Patricia McAllister here, teacher and an activist to remove the 3 million illegal aliens out of Section 8 housing. I'd like to talk about item 3, the shared home sharing. I agree with this. We need anything to get people off the street, but I still don't see you building any affordable housing. But I agree with this, but I'm worried about this Affordable Housing Trust Fund, where you're going to shift the money to Affordable Housing Trust Fund and a new short-term rental enforcement trust fund. I think that any monies you get from this project should go into building affordable housing. Now, I've been doing research on the trust fund, this whole trust fund thing. There are about 45 of them now. Every week you got some new ones. So I'm doing some investigation on where that money is going, because I'm suspicious. But anyway, I just think that all the money you make from these nice people who are willing to rent out their homes should go to building affordable housing. Thank you.
Robin Greenberg. Oh, no, not Robin Greenberg. I think that concludes. Andy Griggs. Andy Griggs.
Yes, my name is Andy Griggs, Echo Park homeowner, retired teacher, active union member, disabled rights and social rights activist, and a home sharer. Today is 2018 and we're concerned about party houses, loud and disruptive gatherings like we just had this last Sunday in many houses around the city. But 47 years ago, it was 1931. The heart of the Great Depression, and in LA there were party houses, and there were loud and unruly gatherings in residences, and all drinking was unusual and illegal due to prohibition, and still there was excessive drinking. And there was displacement and a lack of unaffordable housing. Los Angeles had decided to build Union Station, and so they razed the old Chinatown and displaced its residents, who moved south toward the East Adam area and west towards what was to become the new Chinatown. And what happened was the people welcomed people into their homes. They shared housing. So, but on item 2, I'm mainly concerned about the generalities of the definition of loud and excessive noise and how difficult this may be to enforce. However, I'm glad you've realized that this is a separate issue from the short-term rental issue and a model for you to use when you address the various concerns you have with short-term rentals. Planning department is still only the tip. This report is only the tip of the problems with the proposed ordinance. 6 months ago, we talked about a point-by-point analysis, and half of those points have not been addressed. The hosts here will lose their homes, and I urge you to consider that their affordable homes will be lost by this ordinance as written.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our multiple item speaker cards list. Item number 4, if we could call that to order, please. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We will take 4 on consent. That's a Porter Ranch specific plan amendments.
And on item 4, Councilman, you may wish to refer that to the city attorney to prepare the amendment to the specific plan.
Okay, we'll refer that to the city attorney without objections. Approve. So ordered. Item 6, we will deny the appeals in as much as the appeals have been withdrawn. As with item 7, we will deny the appeals in as much as they have been withdrawn. Any objections to that? Seeing no objections, so ordered. And now we move to item number 1, report from the Director of Planning, Mr. Vince Bertoni.
Good afternoon. Kevin Keller, sitting in for Vince Bertoni, Executive Officer of the City Planning Department. We do not have a director's report today. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions? No questions. We will receive and file item number 1. Item number 2.
Item 2, Councilman, this is a city attorney prepare ordinance to regulate party houses in the city.
Thank you. Is staff here on this item? Or are we just, let me see. Okay, staff here on this item?
Adrian Corsani, City Attorney's Office. Our Municipal Branch Chief, David Michelson, is here if you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions? And item 2, any public comment on item 2? No, we have no public comment, correct? Do we? Here, okay. Robin Greenberg?
My name is Robin Greenberg. I'm president of the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council, and I want to thank you all for the hard work that you do every day to protect us. And I want to ask your help. We live in the hills. We had a fire on December 6th, 2017, and in our opinion, other fires perhaps could be started in the hills or everywhere by people who are not familiar with the protection of the hills. Sometimes when people come into the environment that they're not accustomed to, maybe in a party house, maybe they're not aware that they really shouldn't be smoking in the hills. And we want you to remember that we want everybody that's in the hills and even everywhere to protect the environment and not to smoke and not to start fires. And we really believe that if people are not familiar with the rules of the neighborhood they're in, they may do damage.
Thank you. Chris Ganser. And after Chris Ganser is Anthea Raymond. Welcome.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen.
Greetings.
My name is Chris. I live in Silver Lake. I do home sharing. I live in my house, and I'm understanding about this going against party houses, and I support that 100%. I can't stand party houses. I have one catty corner from me. It's not a short-term rental. It's actually long-term kids, young hipsters, and they have their parties that go till 4 in the morning. Neighbors and I are trying to figure out what to do about it. In my house, I have a very strict rule about this. My kitchen is closed at 10 p.m., just so my other roommates and guests don't even hear the noise, okay? And you can't go in there until 8 a.m. I had a girl living downstairs. I love her, but you know, when she was a full-time tenant, but she would have her industry parties, and that would go till 2 and 3 in the morning, okay? And there was nothing we could do about it because she was a tenant. Now that it's all short-term rentals and travelers, I never have to deal with that. My neighbors don't have to deal with it. The other roommates don't have to deal with it. So if you put some sort of 180-day cap or whatever on short-term rentals, it destroys me and does absolutely nothing for these party houses because I believe that covers every single Friday and Saturday for an entire year. So they can do it legally, okay? Think about that. Thank you.
Anthea Raymond.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Anthea Raymond, and I live across the street from what is arguably the biggest party house in all of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles River Center, where every Friday and Saturday night weddings and other large celebrations continue till midnight without any, and it's fine. It's fine with me. It's fine with my neighborhood. It's fine with the fact that those weddings go to support the parks in our city. But I'm here to comment just on the fact that I'm glad also that you guys are addressing a separate issue of party houses, which seems to me to go to the core of what all the objections to Airbnb in our city are all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And I believe we've heard this item before. What's before us today is the ordinance, and I want to thank Councilmember Rue's efforts to ensure the creation of enforcement mechanisms, which is so important to this. Any other comments? Without objection, we will approve this item. Next item is item number 3.
Item 3, Councilman, this is a communication from the City Planning Commission. It's a proposed ordinance to regulate home sharing in the city.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Arthi Varma, City Planning Department. I'd like to introduce Matt Glesney, project manager for this. He'll give a brief presentation.
Good afternoon, council members. Matt Glesney with the Department of City Planning. On October 24th, 2017, the Plum Committee considered the home sharing ordinance and instructed the Department of City Planning, along with the Office of City Attorney and CAO office, to report back on a total of 10 policy considerations. You have a written report dated January 11th, 2018. In the interest of time, we thought we'd focus largely on 3 of the larger policy considerations in front of you. First, we wanted to talk about options. We were asked to look at options or mechanisms to allow short-term rentals to go beyond the proposed 180-day cap. The department proposed 2 main options that would be available: a discretionary process that would allow exceptions beyond the cap, and then we looked at a non-discretionary process that would be more sort of by right if you meet certain policy criteria. The discretionary process is outlined in the report. It would be maybe perhaps something like a conditional use permit. It has the advantage of allowing for a case-by-case individual review of the site and the property, and be able to solicit input from neighbors and perhaps city council members. So that it has a lot of upside, and be able to look at how well the property has been performing in the past. However, it would be very resource heavy and require significant staff resources to manage the expected caseload that would be expected. For that reason, we also explored a simpler approach that would allow exemptions to the cap based on objective policy criteria. The city could look at perhaps whether the stays are hosted. This is a way that many other cities have addressed this issue, looking that if somebody's actually staying there with the guest, there's a lot less likely to be problems. It has a lot of advantages. The downside is it's very difficult to determine on a night-by-night basis whether a stay is actually hosted. We'd be relying on basically self-certification on that point, most likely, and complaint-based. A proxy that could be used is looking at shared space listings. Most listings say whether they're an entire home or a shared space. So if we wanted an easy, kind of quick thing, we could say shared spaces could be one way to extend beyond the cap. That also has some downsides in that it's not always so clean in terms of what is a true shared space and what is listed as an entire home. We may capture some things that were unintended. The department also looked at things like geographic considerations, overconcentration, and financial hardship criteria. Those are also options, but also have sort of downsides in terms of being able to do exactly what the council may want. But those options are presented for you. Secondly, we were asked to look at options that would expand and update the process for doing short-term rental beyond primary residence. As you know, the proposal in front of you is about home sharing, your own primary residence. We were asked to look at options that could extend beyond that and allow for corporate rentals or perhaps vacation rentals. The report does largely focus on options that could most easily be incorporated within the current ordinance and its current environmental analysis, rather than speculate about a potential companion ordinance. Due to the degree that this topic ventures outside the currently proposed home sharing ordinance, a separate ordinance might be warranted. Consideration of vacation home policies may benefit from additional outreach and staff development, including a new environmental analysis. However, the report did identify one area that could be relatively easily modified within the scope of this ordinance if the council is interested. This is something that's sort of hidden in our zoning code called a Transient Occupancy Residential Structure, or a TORS for short. This is actually a designation the city already allows for apartments to be converted to short-term use if they're in a high-density residential zone and goes through a conditional use process. Based on the motion, the original motion from Councilmember Bonin and Weezer, we'd actually proposed to limit the conversions of apartments to these short-term rentals. So the draft in front of you actually shuts down the ability to convert apartments to tours use while continuing to allow them to be built from the ground up. However, an option before the council is to take a more nuanced approach rather than banning that conversion altogether, to continue to allow apartments to be converted, but put additional conditions and standards on that. You could think about protecting rent-stabilized units or limiting the amount of days or number of things rather than it's fairly open-ended today. So we wanted to mention that for council as an option. Third, and lastly, we looked at the idea of adding a $4 per night surcharge for all listings on the platforms. I believe the intent of this instruction was to reduce the fee that could be charged on the affordable housing linkage fee. The report goes through an analysis based on consultations with the city attorney's office about California state law and the limits that state law does place on fees and the ability to place taxes. The conclusion is that the city council could do something like that at a $4 surcharge, but it would have to be a surcharge based on enforcement and administration of the ordinance and not directly to fund affordable housing. But that 4% surcharge could allow the city to then reduce, I should step back and say today the draft ordinance would dedicate 10% of the TOT, the transient occupancy tax, to administration and enforcement. So a $4 surcharge could essentially take the place of a $10 10% TOT tax, and then free up those dollars to be used for other purposes, including affordable housing. So there's a way to achieve that objective, but it would have to go through the general fund, essentially. But with that, I know we didn't touch on all 10 items. We are more than happy to answer any questions on any other items. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So with that, let me begin by saying that we last heard this item in October, and it's an extremely complicated matter. We wanted to allow for the public to review the report that came out from planning, and last time we were going to schedule to hear this item, we realized that the public needed some time to digest that report. But now that we have it before us, we hope to take up any questions or comments from the public as well as from our committee members. So would the committee's desire be to go to public comment first, or do you guys have some public comment first? Okay. So today we're going to limit the public comment to 20 minutes. We've heard the overall item several times already, and today on the particular report that came out from the planning department, we hope to get through public comment today on that. First is Pastor Jones, and then Rabbi Baruch.
Good afternoon to this distinguished board. Pastor Eddie Jones, president of the Los Angeles Civil Rights Association. And as this issue has been discussed for a long period of time, I urge this committee to move forward and make a decision and find a healthy balance for our communities. My deepest concerns are the most vulnerable people, including the elderly, the disabled, and the thousands upon thousands of Los Angeles residents that struggle below the poverty level and can barely pay rent and going rates. My hope is that all the committee will set the cap as low as possible, ideally as below 90 days. So as you analyze and evaluate how this will play out, just want to let something sink into the residents of your heart and mind. Do not allow Airbnb to operate vacation houses only through primary residences, and I hope you all have a wonderful, positive, and productive day, and let's get the work done. God bless you.
Thank you. Rabbi Baruch, Judy Goldman, Kendall Mayhew.
Good afternoon, committee. I have a letter I'd like to present to you. I urge you guys to make a decision. This keeps bouncing back and forth, and every time you're supposed to make a decision, for some reason, there's some sort of delay. 90 days, according to my opinion, is not enough, but your opinion doesn't matter here, and you need to make a decision. People need housing. Like today, you can't find an apartment for under $2,000, but if you look around, you see entire apartment buildings that are converted to Airbnbs, and they're all under LARSO. They're all they're all supposed to be for the people, and then it's being turned into a business. It's unfair. People are having a hard time. People are coming to me in my own synagogue and tell me, Rabbi, I'm not sure what to do. I think I'm moving to Vegas or I'm moving to Arizona. My kids just got married and they can't afford to rent an apartment here. Forget about buying. It's an apartment for rent, and they're not able to afford it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Judy Goldman.
I'm Judy Goldman, co-founder of Keep Neighborhoods First. Today I speak for many people throughout our city who are angry and dismayed by how long this process is taking. While people are being made homeless, rents are getting further out of reach, and residential neighborhoods are being gutted. Councilmember Bonin introduced this motion almost 3 years ago, but many folks had already been living this nightmare for years before that. To hear that this item will now go back to CPC for yet another round of hearings is shocking. We've heard hours of testimony, seen plenty of reports from city departments. What we haven't heard or seen is action and determination to do something. We're losing close to 5 entire homes a day, most of them affordable, and the total is now up to the tens of thousands. Allowing this motion to languish turns a blind eye to this. How much longer are you going to let this decimation of our neighborhoods and housing go on? Please move this forward with a 60 to 90 day cap and a 9-month primary residency requirement if you decide to do a waiver. Thank you.
Thank you. Kendall Mayhew.
Yeah, hi. Hi, my name is Kendall Mayhew. I'm here in 2 capacities. One as a staff organizer at Power Los Angeles, where I work with low-income and no-income communities, where I've seen the impact of Airbnb for years now. I'm also here in a personal capacity as a renter who was forced out of my home, just moved a week ago, and now that home is now 2 units that are entirely Airbnbs, and as a result of that, what's difficult about that is that our landlord, who we had a very good relationship with in the beginning, saw that an unregulated system was incentivizing her to push us out. And it was really heartbreaking to see the way that profits became so much higher that they were able to take away the humanity of the people that she was renting to for over 6 years. That's a neighborhood my family's been in since the turn of the century. It's been really emotional to have to leave it. We couldn't afford to stay there. So on both a professional and personal level, I've seen the long-term impacts that are devastating. So please move forward quickly.
Thank you. David Ewing, Jill Stewart, Jane Taguchi.
Good afternoon. I'm David Ewing, a 40-year resident of Venice. You say you want to end homelessness. You say there's an affordable housing crisis, but for the past 4 years, you've been acting like Nero, fiddling while thousands of Angelenos lose their homes and neighborhoods are destroyed. And now this motion might go back to CPC for even more analysis. There's no excuse. You know you have the information to make a decision. Homeowners who say they need to do short-term rentals full-time to stay in their homes have another option. They can do real rentals and give somebody a home. Tenants who get Ellised or priced out by short-term rentals have another option too. They can live in their cars or on sidewalks with nearly 30,000 other Angelenos. It's time to act. Replace politics with a pound of common sense and an ounce of courage. Move forward with a 60 to 90 day cap and a 9-month primary residency requirement if there's a waiver. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Jill Stewart, Executive Director of the Coalition to Preserve LA and a resident of Woodland Hills. We're very concerned about the city moving toward Airbnb as a natural part of how we handle our housing, and that's because so much hollowing out has happened in Venice and now in Silver Lake of illegal Airbnbs that are taking over what used to be housing. Everything that David Ewing just said is true and needs to be dealt with. But we're also very, very concerned about the latest idea, transit-occupied residential structures, which almost no one has ever heard about, which allow the owner of an apartment building to decide if the unit is an apartment, if it's an apartment or it's a house, back and forth, whatever they want to do with that building. The incredible instability this brings to Los Angeles neighborhoods, the greed this brings to people bidding up properties so they can turn it into a transit-occupied residential structure instead of actual housing is going to be a disaster. In fact, I think your entire process is very, very disastrous. Thank you.
Jane Taguchi, Johnny Ayon, Liana Wachtal.
My name is Jane Taguchi. I first came to a plum meeting 3.5 years ago when I complained of the Airbnb across the street from me. I had hoped for enforcement, which never happened. Over the past 4 years, without enforcement, many more short-term rentals have appeared. Are these sharing to make extra money or businesses? This particular Airbnb host has earned hundreds of thousands of dollars while intimidating my neighborhood. She verbally threatened me. She called the police. She sent cease and desist letters to neighbors. She took me to civil court, all of this with lies, and she doesn't even live at the house. Look, I don't have a financial stake here. I'm a law-abiding citizen in this group of 99.9%. Airbnb and hosts make money. The city makes TOT tax money. What do I get out of this? I want a peaceful neighborhood without a hotel. Please help to pass an ordinance that gives us transparency, fairness, and enforcement. I have been waiting for 4 years now. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Ilana Wachtel with the Coalition to Preserve LA, and I'm here to speak on the hybrid tours or flexible housing. I'm concerned that this is merely a workaround for the home sharing ordinance, which would undermine an ordinance that hasn't even been created yet, one which doesn't have an agency oversight, and this is being done in a way that is not aligned with the city charter. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Ayon. I'm a community organizer at the Thai Community Development Center in East Hollywood. We're also an affordable housing developer. Thai CDC is a member of the LA for Airbnb Coalition, interested to protect affordable housing amidst the worst housing crisis the city of LA has ever seen. The policy to regulate short-term rentals was introduced on June 2nd, 2015, almost 3 years ago. Since then, we have lost over 4,754 units. Every day we lose almost five units, and every month we lost 147 units. We can't delay this any longer, and we want with people's homes being at risk. In East Hollywood, we constantly hear complaints from tenants and homeowners regarding the Airbnb party rooms which have flooded Hollywood. The rents keep getting higher, and there are no affordable rooms for people to rent. I sadly constantly run into friends from high school who I graduated with that are now homeless because they cannot afford the high rents in LA. It's time for the city of LA to regulate short-term rentals today, and we need to work on other ways to make our city more affordable for all Angelinos. Thank you.
Susan Hunter.
My name is Susan Hunter. I'm with the Coalition to Preserve Los Angeles, as well as the Los Angeles Tenants Union Hollywood Local, and I'm very frustrated with Matthew Glesney because we have gone over this back and forth. It's called hybrid tours. Nobody's questioning the tours' existence. What we're questioning is a hybrid version that the planning department has come up with on their own that nobody else is aware of that can actually evict people out of their rent-stabilized units if they are doing Airbnb. It is not okay for the city to come up with a workaround when you have people who are pro and con on an issue trying to hammer out a consensus, and you want to protect your financial investments. Hybrid tours has got to be stopped. It has got to be halted. It has to be ceased immediately. It is no longer okay for the city and the planning department to come up with something that undermines the work of a community trying to get on a consensus, even when they have opposing views. Thank you.
Robin Greenberg. And Ms. Greenberg, I understand you spoke on an item before, but you're here speaking here as a representative of a neighborhood council. Is that correct?
Yes, and I had a CIS on my previous, and I have a CIS
Yeah,
on this.
This 3 minutes instead of one.
Yes, I understand. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I again want to commend you on your hard work. We do appreciate it so much. And again, I just want to reiterate that because we just recently had a fire on December 6, 2017, we who are Hillside residents, and this neighborhood council I represent goes all the way from the 405 to Laurel Canyon along the hillsides. We ask you to please remember that we don't think it should be one blanket statement for all. We think that this is a very important issue in the hillsides where we're very concerned about fire and about teaching people the rules of living in the hills. In addition to that, we strongly oppose any amendments that would allow individuals, hosts, to exceed the annual cap or self-certify residency. We also oppose any diversion of the transient occupancy tax receipts to the general fund or any diversion of the currently proposed allocations for enforcement of this ordinance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. America Lopez, Eric Stolp, Laban Freitas, or Pratis, what are the two?
So before she gets started, on behalf of the folks that can't speak today, we'd like to give these letters to
Two things. Your time is starting, and you want to get that to the, okay. You want to submit that? Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is America. I wanted to let you know that the proposed ordinance will hurt low-income homeowners like my parents, who are hardworking immigrants who bought their first home, which is an RSO. I wish my parents was here today so I can tell you of their struggles in person, but they can't afford to take off time from their work. As their daughters, we are their voice. We're asking you to please listen to us very carefully. RSO is a duplex. We could never rent the front house full time because we have extended family members who come for contract work, short-term contract work. They are migrant workers. They come by to do power installation in different parts of Los Angeles. We're asking you to please consider us. Please consider my parents, who are hardworking immigrants, to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Stolp, Laban Freitas or Freitas. Whoever's first is fine.
Hi, my name is Laban, and I live in Echo Park, and I bought my house in 2008, and it got a little bit tough around then. Oh, thanks. And I know a lot of people struggled and lost their home, and I almost did, but one of the things that helped me save my home was home sharing. And a couple points that I noticed when I had renters, they all had cars. And when I get guests, they like to use public transportation. They rely on it, so they use buses and subways. And in LA, that seems like a needed thing. Also, they're on a mission to go out and spend money because they want to go experience LA. They want to go to, I recommend restaurants and coffee shops and bars and museums and parks and libraries, and the list goes on, and they're here for a short time, and they go out there and they spend money in LA. So I think that's good too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You're Eric?
Yeah, hello, my name is Eric Stolp. I have a property, 3 units in Silver Lake since 2007. 3 years ago, I decided to host one of them, and it's been great. It's been helping us as additional income. I love this neighborhood. The neighbors, they know me, and I respect my neighborhood. And since I'm in one of them, I'm always watching for who comes in so they don't disrupt in the neighborhood. Also, I find there a great, since LA is one of the greatest places, people from everywhere want to come here. It's another way for them to, for a short term, come and visit. Many fans from Dodger Stadium, Staples, Hollywood, and they love it. They live so happy, and I know it made a lot for tourists in this way. So please let us keep hosting. This is my second home, and I'm always making sure it's safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Handy, Michelle Say Well, Rob Huff.
I'm a native Californian who has owned my own home and property in Venice for almost 30 years. For the first 20 of those years, we rented out our second house on the property under the RSO program, but discovered over time that the biggest demand near the beach was for furnished places for short-term visitors to Southern California. Before we found out that no one is zoned to do this, we collected and sent to the Office of Finance over $25,000 in 6 years, along with the reports that they required every month. We will never rent our second house out again to a long-term tenant. We need it for our family who visits more now that we are retired. In between those visits, some short-term rentals would help us pay our bills as well as to contribute to the economy of LA. I'm asking you as decision makers for the city to step up and embrace this worldwide phenomenon of home sharing. Establish some rules, provide some oversight, and let your tax-paying residents like me make ends meet when we have to. I'll bet you can do a lot of things, good things for LA with the tax money Airbnb hosts are collecting and turning in. Why would you want to stop or cap that? Thank you.
To my council member of the fabulous CD8, Marquise Harris Dawson, to the other distinguished council members of Los Angeles, fellow constituents of the city of Los Angeles, and members of the audience, good afternoon. I am a proud exporter of American tourism here in our great city of Los Angeles, more precisely in South Los Angeles. The city and Airbnb have my full support for partnership for the betterment of all of Los Angeles. The ordinance as written today would be to my detriment, along with the daughter I support. Gone would be my business of exporting American tourism in South Los Angeles. Along with my business would be the income that has helped pay for tuition, books and fees, LADWP, mortgage, through periods of unemployment, and general expenses to live. We have an opportunity to get this right. Unrestricted housing for vacation rentals and second homes as it stands today is what I'm voting for.
Rob Huff.
Greetings. My name is Rob Huff, father of two. I am LA. I'm a descendant of the first families in Venice, California. I've been here for 50 years. My 90-year-old mother and myself use Airbnb to make our way of life here in the city of Venice through the various changes. All the new people that come in don't like what we do, but it's the one way that we've been able to sustain and stay there. We employ ourselves with a family-based business model, which, barely pays the equivalent of a monthly amount of a long-term renter. But it gives us the freedom to do what we want for our own needs with our own home. The draconian laws of renters' rights and have proven to be, unfair to the owners like myself and my family. Being an Airbnb host ain't easy, but it's very gratifying. And it allows us to be the ambassadors of this city and help everybody get a piece of the pie.
Dominique Ayon, can't understand the writing here. Dominique. Heather Santora, Andy Griggs, Michael Palazzo. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Dominique. I live in Vermont Square. I have a fourplex and with two long-term tenants. My fiance and I live in one, and we have one short-term tenant. Our revenue allows us to renovate the property and make it safer. We've installed automatic gates, added plants, installed grass, changed out the locks. We have automatic lights that come on all around the complex. It's also allowed us to fix all the deferred maintenance, such as door jams with water intrusion. And it's also bringing the community closer together. Our tenants' children come out to help us on the weekends to help with landscaping. They come out so often that we now have little hammers and nails, so it's getting them involved. We often have other tenants come around and tell us how amazing the property is. And for the first time, our tenants have actually had grass ever in their lives. One of our tenants absolutely loves the idea of having people come into the neighborhood, and we've hired them on as our long-term cleaners. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Airbnb actually keeps me and my sons in our home. I'm a single mom, and I live in a front house, back house with my 2 young sons. Finding myself falling deeply into debt post-divorce, we fixed up and started renting out our back house to guests in 2014. Since then, we have hosted hundreds of guests without issue. My neighbors, especially the local shops, love my guests and the tourism money that would not otherwise make it into my East LA neighborhood. We are booked 325 nights per year. Please do not put any cap on our number of calendar nights. Doing so would effectively shut down our B&B. I would not open up our back house to a long-term tenant after being burned in the past. I'll save you the details. On a larger scale, I own a short-term rental cleaning company that supports 13 other single mom households called Heather's Angels. Please do not put my angels out of a job. I support the council in taking the time it needs to create an intelligent ordinance without calendar caps that honors the needs of both owners, hosts, neighborhoods, and the businesses that receive the millions of tourism dollars that come to our city.
Hi. Hello, I'm Michael. I live in Sherman Oaks in a house for the last 25 years with my wife and my daughter. We have our main house and then an unattached guest house in the back. And for the last almost 4 years, we've been renting out the guest house, and this has saved us from having to move. It's been a godsend. And I just want to say, if you put a cap on the amount of days that we can rent that guest house, it's not going to work for us. We'll have to move. And we're just starting to put our daughter through college now. And again, this has been a saving grace. Also, we have our main house, like I said. We would like to be able to rent out our main house when we're not renting out our guest house. We'll never rent it out simultaneously. We would like to be able to do that. It's the same property. I would like to ask you, with your legislation, if you would please err on the side of empathy for people that are doing it right, not the bad people. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Griggs here? Andy Griggs, you spoke already, right? Yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you. That's fine. Thank you. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments from committee members? Mr. Rubenfield.
Thank you. Good to hear all the. Is this on? Hello? Okay. Good to hear the topic. I think like many of you, I'm eager to see us take some action. This has been kicking around for a long time. It's a complicated issue, as evident, but we need to move forward in many ways. There's, just a couple reactions and then a couple of questions. I mean, I hear what people are saying on both sides of this issue, in terms of, people wanting to have, a business and be able to do this and keep their homes. I get that. I also get that we don't want to, you can't have a carte blanche business in your home, just like you couldn't, have another business in your home. At some point, it's not just an ancillary use to your home. It's actually a business in a residential area. So finding that fine line is important. I actually think that where we're going with this is the right direction in terms of, I think we should be both lowering the cap and raising the cap. And I know it seems like a contradiction, but lowering the cap as in terms of just the straight out process, but then having a little bit more flexibility if there is a process to do so. And I liked what you're saying in terms of there's a discretionary process and a non-discretionary process. One of the things I wanted to add to the non-discretionary process and ask you about is the idea of having your adjacent neighbors sign off. Because one of the issues with Airbnb is the impact that it has if there is a neighbor causing issues with the adjacent neighbors, either whether it's late night parties or just a lot of excess traffic or whatever the issues are. So if as part of the non-discretionary, in order to go to a higher number than whatever the cap is, I would say lower the cap maybe to 120, but then raise the discretionary cap up to 240, something like that. How does that? What are your thoughts about that idea in terms of, and is there precedent for having sign off by adjacent neighbors for other types of activities?
This is Arthi Varma, the Planning Department. We could certainly look into a process of lowering the cap and doing an abutting and adjacent notification to the neighbors for those properties that want to go above the cap up to a certain point. That's something we'd be happy to look into and come back to you with.
Great. I mean, I would see that as part of the, if you had a process for the, I don't want to allow one neighbor to hold someone hostage, so to speak, but if you have a discretionary process that allows you to go above the cap, which may involve hearings and other types of things, but then but that's a burden, I understand, for the department, but you had a sort of shortcut process which involves signing off by the neighbors, in which case, and it has to be reviewed every 2 years or something to that effect, as the license gets renewed, that would give the neighborhood a little bit more confidence that what was happening there was something that was in line. So that, for me, that's something I want to make sure is part of this.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, can I inquire a little more? I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're asking before we come back. You're envisioning a non-discretionary process that has, or two different non-discretionary processes, one that is faster if you get neighbors' sign-offs and one that is not if you don't get the neighbors' sign-offs? Just trying to make sure.
Couple ways. I mean, you guys are going to come back with the ideas, but here's a couple of ways it could work. If you had 120 days is what you get straight out if it's your primary residence, the way you have it discussed here. Then, if you wanted to go up to the 240, there is a discretionary process which involves a hearing and whatnot that you would go through potentially. But if you wanted to shortcut that process to get higher than the 120 to get up to the 240. We would have a few ways that you could do that. And the way that I thought of it that might make sense would be a sign-off by your neighbors, by all your adjacent neighbors, front, back, side, rear, etc., as a way to
and you're willing to entertain other ideas? You're just throwing that out there as one,
I'm throwing that, I mean,
one way to look at it.
The idea that you're talking about, which I like, which is the idea of a discretionary process in general for going beyond the caps, but recognizing that that's burdensome, creating a non-discretionary one, and the one that immediately comes to mind for me is, well, the fastest, easiest way is if you can assure the city that all of your adjacent neighbors are okay with what you're doing, so to speak, and they're willing to sign off on a form, then you can go up to the higher number. Now, I would also do something. I mean, I think there's probably also should be something about hosted and non-hosted, meaning if I'm just throwing out ideas, let's say if you go beyond the 120, at least the additional days need to be hosted, meaning that nobody could do more than 120 non-hosted days. But if you go beyond the 120 and you want to have any combination of hosted and non-hosted, as long as at least half of them are hosted, you can go up to that cap of 240 or something to that effect.
And if I might, by hosted, you mean the primary resident is actually staying there at the same time that the guests are staying there?
That's an idea to put out there. So I'm not shy about in terms of, I think the numbers need to be altered, but both altered down and altered up in the sense of if there is this process. Basically we need to have rules and I mean, you've laid out a lot of it. We're getting very close on a lot of this stuff, and I like some of the main pieces of this: limiting to primary residence, banning on the RSOs, strong enforcement. The 10% set aside for enforcement, I think, is very good. I'd like to see of the remaining 90%, 45% for the general fund and 45% for the affordable housing fund. And that also helps with enforcement because 70% of the general fund ends up going to public safety anyway. But I just throw that out there so you know where I'm everyone knows where I'm thinking on some of these things. But that, I think, those are my main questions at the moment. Oh, one other thing about in the report there was some comments about the it has to be the owner of the place, if you're renting, has to sign off on it. I still like the idea that that we have a system whereby if an owner of a building or something else sends us a note saying they don't want this unit to be on the list, that we have the ability to prevent that unit from being on the list, because this whole thing is premised on it's the permission of the property owner. The other question I had has to do with liability insurance. It's been raised to me that perhaps we need to require liability insurance, and I wanted to ask particularly City Attorney, do we have any liability as a city? Or is it just, if we, this idea of whether we ask for liability insurance, in one case it's just a good idea for folks to have that, to be covered themselves, but is there some protection for the city because we are, in effect, helping issue this license where there would be some liability on the city?
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, actually the government code provides an immunity. The city is immune from torts, money damage claims with regard to the issuance of permits. And in this instance, the registration that's been proposed is very similar to issuance of a permit, and so there's no liability for the city on our registration process.
Right. And finally, I do think we need to deal with the separate issue of vacation rentals and those secondary units, which at the moment they're not included in this at all, and that would be a sort of a completely separate process potentially. But that's it, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you for your steady leadership on this issue over the several months you've all been engaged in it. Special thanks to staff and also for folks on both sides of the issue, on all sides of the issue. I appreciate the input. And I know that we're moving towards an ordinance. I know there's still some issues that we're going to ask planning to take a look at. And I want to make sure we focus a little bit more on the tours conversions, the impact of those. I think there could be a positive development. Just make sure we're fleshing it out all the way. And I'm also looking forward to learning more on the discretionary approval process. Again, how that can be implemented as a part of the process. Again, respecting the rights of individuals, entrepreneurs, neighborhood entrepreneurs, but also the surrounding neighborhood community. And again, our challenge is to sort of balance both of those. But I think we're going in the right direction, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your leadership and look forward to the report back.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Price. Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you. I think we've narrowed this issue down quite a bit from when we first got it from the Citywide Planning Commission. And in your last report, you raised the issue of possibly allowing a discretionary process for good operators, for good neighbors, to be able to get additional days above a cap. Generally, there's kind of general consensus that I hear that people are interested in exploring and going down that path. With that in mind, we would like to get further information on that item in particular, but we'd want this back in 30 days, and hopefully in 30 days when it comes back to Plum, we will take action and send this to full council. And so I'd like to move that we instruct the planning department to report back to Plum in 30 days with a general framework and review process that would allow qualified hosts to participate in home sharing above the citywide cap. The general framework should include review process options that address the following: identifying the appropriate department and decision maker, application filing fees, public hearing requirements, including neighbor notification parameters, appeal process provisions, non-compliance penalties, including appropriate fees and/or registration sanctions. And I'm not sure if that covered some of the points you raised, Mr. Blumenfield, or anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it did, although, I mean, I think I added a couple of specific ideas I wanted them to include on the report back, like the neighbor sign-off in particular.
Okay, and they got that to report back on those. And if we do proceed down the path of having a discretionary process, we obviously do not want to make it a burdensome one. Initially, when the idea of a discretionary process came up, people were talking about a conditional use permit, which is expensive, burdensome, and we want to just have some type of administrative procedure that could be created that has some conditions as to when a person would be allowed to go above the cap, if at all. That's the idea, and I kind of laid out what would hopefully get us there.
Sure.
So, go ahead, Mr. Bloomfield.
Yeah, the one other thing I did mention also was the idea that if, at the same time that we're doing that and creating this ability to go beyond the cap, that may also provide the opportunity to have a lower cap in terms of the non, we're creating a process to go above that cap, but at the same time, that also opens up the door to having responsibly having a lower cap.
Yeah, and I think that without just saying the cap today, that it includes that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
To see what that may be. Yeah. So, anything else, Ms. Englander?
Just one thing on the one of the options that you suggested in the beginning on the surcharge portion that could be used for permitting as well as enforcement, administrative and enforcement. And so with that, obviously that's a pass-through for the folks that would be utilizing it, not the folks that are using any of the platforms. But in any event, if you could just flush that out, and when you bring it back on what we're looking at in that space in terms of dollars. I mean, obviously, we're looking at a primary right now, so just flushing it out on the primary portion, and how that would work in terms of then freeing up those TOT funds for general fund. So if you can just give us something, perhaps working with the CAO and flushing that out a little bit, so we can look at that as an option when it comes back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'd also like to add that we will instruct the planning department to prepare as needed any amendments to the associated environmental clearance document. So to summarize, I think where we are is we've had a lot of testimony on the item. We've narrowed it down now to a couple of issues, which is the cap and a discretionary process that we need to decide, and that would come back to us in 30 days. And then for the people in the audience, we hope to take up the whole package in 30 days. This is just the one final issue we are examining and reviewing, but when we come back in 30 days, we hope to take action on the full package and send it off to full council. Okay. Anything else on this item? No. Okay. With that, anything else from the planning department or city attorney? Anybody need clarification on directions? No? We're good. Okay. Thank you very much. That'll be the direction of this committee, and we'll hear back on this item in 30 days. Thank you. Next item.
Next item, Councilman, is item 5. This is an appeal by the applicant appellant, Stephanie Tate. She's appealing the decision of the Director of Planning as it relates to a certificate of appropriateness for a fence in CD5.
Okay, staff, just a brief overview of what this item is, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Blair Smith from the Department of City Planning, Office of Historic Resources, Historic Preservation Overlay Zone Unit.
One second. For those of you who are exiting, if you could please keep your voice down as you exit, and so we could continue the meeting. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Blair Smith from the Department of City Planning, Office of Historic Resources, Historic Preservation Overlay Zone Unit. The City Council initiated Charter Section 245 has asserted jurisdiction over a partial appeal from the applicant of the decision to approve a second-story addition to a one-story contributing historic structure within the Carthay Circle HPOZ. The appeal is specific to the conditions of approval. The issues still under contention fall into 3 categories: fencing, cladding, and roof materials. Per the Carthay Circle Preservation Plan, the installation of a front yard fence is inappropriate. The Carthay Circle HPOZ Board, the Cultural Heritage Commission designee, and the Central Area Planning Commission were all in agreement that a front yard fence would be inappropriate on the site. The appellant is requesting to maintain an overheight hedge and an unapproved overheight fence in the front yard. Within the City of Los Angeles, an overheight fence or hedge cannot be granted without a zoning administrator action. The appellant was informed of this and chose not to apply for a variance. There are alternative options that would accomplish the same safety goals. One of these would be to install darkly colored bollards within the existing front yard hedge. When the applicant initially contacted staff regarding the proposed scope of work, staff informed them a number of alterations had occurred on the property without HBOZ review or without a building permit. These alterations were conditioned to be reversed in the director's determination. The appellant has appealed 4 conditions relating to the restoration of the historic wood siding and the removal of an unapproved stone cladding. These conditions ensure the integrity of the historic resource, and removing them, these conditions would not conform to the Carthay Circle Preservation Plan. Staff has agreed to support 2 of the appellant's appeal points relating to roof materials, and the Central APC adopted modified conditions of approval to reflect this concurrence. Staff recommends that the Plum Committee uphold the Central Area Planning Commission's decision by adopting the APC's modified conditions of approval and findings, which revised conditions 2L, 2N, 2Q, and 2R, reflecting fence heights and roof materials, and modifications to findings to support these changes. Per the recommendation of the City Attorney, the conditions, the indemnification language should be modified to be updated to city standards. If additional conditions for safety are needed, staff recommends adding a condition to allow for bollards to be installed in the front yard. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now go to public comment. The applicant rep, Rob Bouchon.
Good afternoon, council members. I do represent the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Stefan Taib. We have worked out, I think, a compromise with the parties involved. I want to thank Councilmember Koretz for having the courage to bring this 245 motion. I want to use this opportunity to share with you my experience, having worked as a council aide, having been a decision maker on the former Board of Zoning Appeals. Everybody has a role. Staff's role, an important role, and I have great respect for planning staff, particularly Mr. Bernstein. But they aren't elected. Their perspective, even on historic resources, should not supersede what neighbors want in their neighborhood. And those of you, you appoint members to HPOZs and design review boards to deal with that. We call it minutia, but it's important stuff. And so it's really important you know at the outset, even though a compromise has been reached, that the stuff we've kind of given up on to get to the compromise, the HPOZ sided with the applicant and our historical architect. The neighbors who are most affected want what we want that staff says is not appropriate. So when you're presented with conflicts, and you all are in your districts, between what staff wants or says is the way it is or the way it should be, and your constituents and perhaps a neighborhood council or an HPOZ, I think you go with what's best for the community, and you call the shots, not planning. There were at least three mistakes made here by planning, and they usually get it right. But I want you to know this. It's important when it comes to when you get staff recommendations. Number one, they required roofing material. That's illegal under the building code. So they at least admitted that at the Area Planning Commission, and that got taken care of. As to fence height, they said, no, you can't, you got to do it this way under this code and reduce it because it's a reverse corner lot. Yet my staff checked with the highest level at planning, building and safety. They both agreed with our research, which is this is not a reverse corner lot. And then finally, this was the most interesting. There was a condition requiring my client to remove windows and double doors that staff didn't even know they had approved back in 2006 under a similar planning director approval. So with the changes that have been made, and I think there's an amended motion by Councilmember Koretz, we're prepared to accept the deletion of the conditions. I believe they will be 2F, 2M, and 2N that were imposed by the APC, and to revise, I believe, condition 2L with regard to existing fencing and hedges, which, by the way, the determination of hedge height, fence height is not in your code up to planning. You've vested that authority with building and safety. And it's building and safety that goes out, and there are some very technical determinations depending upon whether it's a reverse corner lot, front yard, side yard, and with hedges. You folks probably know this from some of your constituents. You could have 500-foot hedges to the sky, but as long as you have a certain amount of space between the trees and a certain amount of height. Our historic architect is present to answer any questions if you have them, but we are prepared to accept the compromise that has been urged by Councilmember Koretz. The findings I've looked at, the revised findings by planning seem appropriate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Aviv Kleinman from Council District 5.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Aviv Kleinman, Planning Deputy for Council District 5. I'm speaking on behalf of Councilmember Koretz. Today we are requesting modified conditions on this item. As stated on the record, the applicant raised this matter to the council member's attention after a vehicle rammed into the property after losing control at the Y-shaped intersection. According to statements provided by the applicant, the fire department deemed that the vehicle would have plowed through the home if it were not for the fence. Given the public safety aspect of this fence and that the guidelines for fencing allow the city to assess the appropriateness of fencing, we would like to urge this committee to adopt the circulated motion. We also urge the committee to adopt the categorical exception pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15300.2. Thank you.
Thank you. So any questions or comments from committee members? No. We'll move to grant in part and deny in part the appeal. We will adopt the revised conditions and findings of approval introduced by Council District 5, which have been circulated, and sustain the remaining findings of the Central Area Planning Commission. Any objections? Seeing no objections, so ordered. Thank you.
Yeah, findings and conditions, and to adopt the categorical exemption, Councilman.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll incorporate that. Thank you. Okay, so ordered. Next item.
That concludes the agenda, Council.
We now have general public comment, and we have Patrick Simmons, not here. Alicia Jones, not here. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.